Jim, how are you doing?
Great. This is a really great, terrific event.
It's great to have you here, and the last session was talking about AI, which we'll get into in just a bit, but I thought it would be interesting for the audience to hear your perspective as someone who has worked in the biotech field 30 plus years, correct?
Yep.
How would you assess the sentiment right now for biotechnology, biosciences? What's your take?
So it really depends on whether you're a scientist or an investor, because the answer is almost opposite right now. So on the science, innovation is exponential, and we're really hitting that upward inflection point. And the thing to understand is every single disease is a finite puzzle of biologic pieces. And genetics has given us a lot of those pieces. And diseases that are very close to genetics, you have almost all of the pieces. So what's happening is universities all over the world are flipping over pieces, putting them in place. And I don't know if people here do puzzles, but as they get finished, it gets easier and easier and easier to put in the last pieces. And that's where we're at in science right now. So it is a certainty that we are going to cure important diseases over the next 10 to 15 years. Certain cancers, there's one genetic mutation. They're going to be very easy. Schizophrenia, over 100 associated genes, and it's in the head. It's harder to get to. So some diseases are going to take longer. They're bigger puzzles, some shorter. Sentiment from investors is terrible. I've been in this business 36 years. I've seen 3 bubbles. What happens in every case is in a 1 to 2 year period, everything doubles, triples. Next 1 to 2 year period, everything collapses back to the same point. So over the last few years, we've gone through a bubble. We've collapsed, so things have reconsolidated. Things are cheap again. But there's also some regulatory uncertainty, at least in the US, on top of that, that's keeping people a little bit nervous on the investment side.
So how critical then is this time period from where you sit with Deerfield? What is it that you think would make the change to prevent this from being another bubble that we've seen in the past?
Well, you know, bubbles are a composite of speculation, interest rates, and a lot of things that make people make bad bets. And what happens in the bubble, the IPO market opens up. People accept companies that are too early, too risky, require too much cash.
We can see there on the screen, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, you have a lot of unsustainable company types in the public markets, and they frankly just have to go away. So you have to just wait for that. That's something that just takes time. Management expectations become unrealistic as well in terms of what their product should be valued at, and that also has to reset. So a lot of this is just time. Yeah.
You talked about a few different diseases that are the compilation of a number of factors. When you think about where Deerfield is investing,
yeah.
Where do you see maybe the most progress? What diseases are we getting closer to finding cures for?
Well, it's definitely those that are linked most closely to genetics. So, you know, a lot of cancers, there's actually lots and lots and lots of different cancers. In each tissue, they're different mutations. And so there's a lot of puzzles to solve in order to, quote unquote, cure cancer. But you're going to see a lot of progress in diseases like that, as I said. The other thing that data and software is transforming right now is the delivery of care. So right now, most of care is, for example, post-heart attack. So in the US, there's over 3 million preventable cardiac procedures per year. Preventable, wow. Right? So medicine itself has to change from being oriented around hospitals and treating people that have had a heart attack to things in the home, medicines and things that can prevent that from occurring in the first place. So there's a huge investment in data, clinical record data, genetic data, and integrating those to understand the best care pathways and really how to do that at home.
So that is AI, more investment into AI and data.
Yeah, AI has transformed how we can combine different data sets. So if you go to a hospital, they keep a clinical record on you. Large hospitals have millions of clinical records, and those clinical records say, hey, if you have people that have these conditions and backgrounds and you do this, it's better. But it's a really complex assemblage of data, and what software is allowing you to do is integrate it in a very useful way, and then ask, where's the best place to deliver this care? If software can be predictive, oftentimes you don't have to go to the hospital or have a direct physician intervention.
Which is interesting to talk to you about, because Deerfield invests across the healthcare value chain, including in hospitals. What does that mean for infrastructure and hospitals and the like? Will there still be a need for that, or will we be preventing more diseases, therefore less patients in the hospital, therefore a less need for them?
I mean, it's a real challenge. I mean, our hospital medical system has been the root of a lot of discovery in medical innovation. Yet at the same time, it's super expensive and it's super dependent on treating diseases that have occurred already.
Yep.
And so the system's going to have to change, and it's really an innovator's game. It's going to be the new drugs, it's going to be the new technologies that allow prevention in the home. And that's why it's really exciting from a venture capital standpoint, because it's probable that the entire system is going to reinvent itself.
What does that mean, though? What does that look like?
Well, take a disease like diabetes. So we all know that there's a weight management component, but there's also an eye component, there's also a heart component, there's also a skin component. And just imagine somebody that has to go see 4 different specialists on 4 different days. They're not going to do it. And it's one reason why chronic illness is not always managed well. It's just too hard for somebody to actually do all that work. So instead, imagine something at home that beeps horribly until you go do something for 5 minutes, where you can have a telemedicine visit. Somebody's going to do that. And so, you know, that suddenly removes visits from a whole bunch of different physician types and brings it home, but at the same time, it makes it accessible, it makes it affordable, and it makes it possible.
So this could ultimately result in healthier, longer lives? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I hope you're saying that.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. And, you know, a lot of people talk about longevity. We tend to talk about health span. So it's harder to move the number of years that someone's alive. It's easier to affect the quality of their life while they are alive. So what you want is each year that you're alive, you want to be able to be engaged, active, do all the things you want to do. And that's definitely going to improve.
Is that in the near term, or do you think it's a bit far off that
No,
will
that's
actually
right.
some sort of improvements?
It's here and now.
It's here and now.
Yeah, I think it's here and now. Now, some things are constrained by regulation. Some things are constrained by how people price things today.
Yeah.
Lots of infrastructure is built around reimbursement systems that exist today. So those are going to be sticky. Those are going to be hard to change. But, you know, there's a cost equation around healthcare where people will consume as much as they can get, right? And companies will charge as much as they can.
Yeah.
And so, you know, on one hand, healthcare expenditures could be just enormous. What changes that is prevention and moving things to the home. And so it's inevitable that, you know, that's eventually going to occur.
You talk about policies, which is a very important component of healthcare. And we're seeing policies different for healthcare, depending on where you look in the world. Is there a model that would be most enabling to get us to some of those progress points that you're talking about there?
Well, look, you have to embrace innovation, and you have to understand that it requires change in reimbursement regulation. So you have to have a model that has the ability to be flexible, and I think, I think most countries actually have that capability if they truly believe that the health is there and that the cost effectiveness of that health is there. And I think that proof point is probably still, 5 to 10 years off for most countries.
Why is that?
Because, like if you're in the middle of it, you can see it, but people haven't experienced it in reality enough to actually believe it. So I think we're just going to have much more real life proof before whole societies embrace all of the change that's necessary.
Are you concerned, though, about some of the pullback in terms of funding from public governments or public policy? Does that risk maybe setting us back in some of the progress that you're noting here?
Yeah, so, NIH funding in the U.S. is one of the most important components of biomedical innovation. It's where a lot of those puzzle pieces get flipped over that the rest of us kind of collect and turn into things that are useful. And right now, the proposal is to reduce the overhead that's paid, that pays for a lot of the stuff there that is used for innovation. And it's been a hugely successful investment over time, but you can't measure it in years. You have to measure it in decades. And when you do, the return has been enormous. I think that's going to settle out somewhere that works. It's a system that's kind of people haven't looked at very closely, and maybe overhead payments to some institutions are too high. So I think it's a fair question.
The debate, you mean?
Yeah, I think the debate's, how much to pay is a fair debate, but, where it lands needs to end up being somewhere reasonable.
But are you optimistic, though, about that happening?
It's too important. Biomedical innovation is too important. And at the end of the day, there is always a strong lobby with many different stakeholders in it that can see that. And so, look, budget in every administration in the U.S. has said, let's go look at healthcare for some pennies, right? And each time it's a terribly difficult conversation because you need innovation, you want to cure disease, you want to make it more affordable, but you don't always want to pay for it now.
Yeah.
So, that tug of war is going to exist forever simply because of healthcare demand.
That means, depending on which jurisdiction you look at, healthcare being treated for a disease is going to potentially even grow exponentially, depending on where you look. Isn't that ultimately not great for the industry and biotechnology as a whole?
Look, I think people want to be disease-free. Yeah. They want to have a long health span. I think the innovations need to be accessible and affordable. If you look at, for example, drug costs, they're growing, but prevention shrinks the other piece, and the other piece is 80% of the cost. So drugs are 20%, all of the infrastructure and everything else is 80%. So even if this grows really rapidly, as long as this shrinks commensurately, the equation is going to work. So that's the proof point that makes everything come together. And, I think everybody would prefer to take a pill than get treated for a heart attack.
Absolutely. Jim, can you talk about your predictions 5-10 years out, considering, again, some of the investments and the innovations that we're seeing today? Where are we headed towards?
I believe that software will end up diagnosing most people. Well within that period. So, right now, software can already diagnose better than most physicians can. I mean, if you think about a primary care physician trying to diagnose any disease, including rare diseases, the chance that they're going to go down all the diagnostic pathways in the right way is very low. But if you're a large language model, you have all of that embedded in you. And so the first point of diagnosis, I think, will be much more large language model driven. Right now, we're very used to second, third, fourth opinions on complicated matters, but that's just because of human fallibility and bias in the process, which the large language models won't have. So I think that's going to be very important. And as a patient, I think they're going to be accessible. So if you want to know something's happening to you or someone you care about, I think there's going to be interfaces where you can get that same download without necessarily going to a physician. And there's a few hurdles that we'll have to get through in order to get there. And I think cancer in 15 years is going to be mostly a thing of the past.
A thing of the past?
Yeah, mostly.
So what will be the need?
I mean, for the health span. I mean, people, if you increase longevity, I take it all back. But within our health span, yeah.
Is there still a need, though, for doctors, for nurses, for researchers? I mean, where do these jobs then go?
Well, that's a problem for way in the future, I think.
Okay.
You know, right now we need all of that infrastructure. In fact, we need more of it. In the U.S., we have a physician shortage, a nurse shortage. The jobs aren't always enjoyable. So it's you know, there's a lot of stress, and of course, you know, physicians and nurses see it's a time of change. Actually, 40% of what a nurse does can be replaced by a large language model, and most of that is documentation and searching for stuff. And so you can actually meaningfully improve a nurse's job and make a hospital more economic by employing a large language model on behalf of the nurse.
Will pandemics then be a thing of the past as well?
I don't think so, because we keep tinkering with stuff, and you know, you look at pandemics. It's, you know, it's our novel interfaces with nature. It's how bugs change over time, and we won't be able to anticipate all of that. We might have a lot faster response. And what you might have seen in COVID that was really cool is we have antibodies, we have mRNA, we have small molecules, we have gene therapy, we have gene editing. So, you know, when a new bug appears, we have a lot of validated tools that can go after it. And if we do that in a cohesive way, then, you know, I think they'll shrink in duration, but I think they're going to stick with us.
The pandemics.
Yeah.
Let's hope not anytime soon. Jim, before we wrap up, let's talk about Deerfield and some of the portfolio of investments. Can you share what excites you about what's in your portfolio and maybe what you're looking to next?
Sure. So, you know, we have our own laboratories, and we are developing our own drugs. So we're developing 25 drugs ourselves at Deerfield. We just dosed a first 2-year-old who has autism with a SHANK3 gene, which they're missing and causes autism, and it was safe. And you know, we're really excited about being able to pick away at diseases that are super important and growing in importance. But this whole software thing is a real thing, and changes how medicine is delivered. So we're very involved with insurers in trying to interpret how to provide the best care at the cheapest cost, and providing tools for that. You know, like GLP-1s, really cool, lose weight, but they actually affect all kinds of other chronic diseases. So what does that mean for you? That's a super complicated question that software is helping us answer on a person-by-person basis. So the drug side, the data delivery side, both very engaged, very excited about.
So we still don't know some of those answers then that you're pointing out there.
Yeah. We still have, you know, we still have another 15 years of discovery at least, yeah.
And so then what happens next? I mean, what will be key to sort of keeping up this momentum in the growth trajectory for bioscience?
Investment in information. You know, if we didn't have genetic information, if we don't have the biological pieces that create the puzzles, we have most of the platform technologies that allow us to get at them, but there needs to be continued research into the puzzles that are still mysterious, especially those really, like schizophrenia, the very big, complicated puzzles that affect Alzheimer's, another very complicated, very large puzzle. Most of the ones that are stuck behind our skull are big and complicated and are going to take a lot more work.
You mentioned insurance companies. I mean, are they incentivized to want to get on board with this because they could ultimately be losing money in the long run, right? I mean, what is in it for them, and what are they telling you in your discussions with them?
Yeah. So look, insurance companies pay a fee. That's a guess. They charge people a certain amount of money for insurance, and it's a guess on what the cost of care is. So once they've created that rate, they care a lot about how much it actually costs them to give that care. So kind of short term, you know, they push back on things that are expensive, but longer term, they recognize that anything that changes, that bends the push of chronic disease is going to lower cost. And so they want to put things in place that systematically lower costs. So they charge this, but it turns out to be this. And then they charge this, which is lower, but it turns out to be this, because they're bending chronic disease. And so all of the tools that we're talking about, all of the drugs that we're talking about bend that curve. And so there's insurance companies, I think, in general, are part of the positive change.
Hopefully we'll continue to bend that curve. Jim,
Yes.
Flynn, thank you so much.
Thank
Very
you.
fascinating conversation.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.